Zach, good to see you, man. Welcome to Pop Alternative.
Thank you. Excellent to be here.
It's always a cool time when one of your shows is going to be able to be seen by people around the world.
Mm.
Overwhelming, right? Is a good word to describe it, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, everything kind of ends up. I mean, for me, it's fairly quiet, but definitely for Emily and Liam and Manny, it's kind of they're really starting to feel it. And we were at the screening last week, in fact, a week ago, and I think that was where it really kind of properly became real. Because I don't know, I feel like I don't properly trust that a thing is happening until it completely is. Because so often in this business, you end up getting like promised something or something seems like it's going to happen, and then it simply falls apart. But I'm really glad that this hasn't. It's coming out because of what I've seen of it. You've probably seen more than I have. It's a really special, wonderful show.
100%. In terms of auditioning, every audition is different, right? Sometimes they tell you about things, sometimes they don't. Like, do you know it's Geek Girl? Do you know it's based on what do you know, like, when you audition for this project?
I knew it was Geek Girl from the very beginning. That was all.
Because sometimes it's not the case, right? Like sometimes it's like Untitled Project or something.
Yeah, sometimes, and so I was. Yeah, in many ways, I was quite lucky to know what I was going in for, and know that there was like to know what was in store. Because it's always slightly nerve-wracking when there's some kind of underlying IP, because there's this whole fan base who are very attached to one specific version of a character, and you're sometimes stepping out of that in a way that you don't know everybody's going to like. But I knew from the beginning that it was going to be Geek Girl. I'd heard some stuff about the casting of it, but I didn't realize there was a part for me. I'd heard of the books when I was younger, when they first came out, but I wasn't aware of Toby. And when I read the character description, I just found sometimes you just have a feeling about something that you can, like, maybe you connect to it in just some kind of small way, or there was just something about it that I was drawn to.
Yeah.
And so I did self-tape and then waited very excitedly to see if I'd hear anything back. And then I did an audition with the producer and the director, and that was pretty much that. It was a very short process. I've talked to Liam since, and apparently he had to do like 6 auditions, and he was like flying places everywhere. And then he asked me, and I was just like, yeah, I went in once. And they were like, yeah, sure, let's give him a try.
And, it's really interesting. You talk about like IPs and everything. I mean, do you like, what is your relationship with the original source material? Like, do you like look at it? Do you throw it away? Because I feel like it really depends on the project, right? And like the role in the landscape of things.
There were certain touchstones. When I went through the book, I found that there were certain touchstones of the character. One of them being kind of a scene that he has later in the book, which is translated, at least in terms of what they express to each other. We tried to make sure it was translated quite seamlessly close to the end of the show in episode 9. And there was that and a couple of other touchstone moments where it was just like, this is the Toby that I'm playing, and this is going to help me get into the character. Other stuff was very much, I mean, in the book, he's a stalker, and that's like and that's kind of the role that he plays in the story, in a way that, so I don't know how it works, but it does somehow, which is very odd. And that's something that we left in the book world, although it was a constant running joke that maybe just the fringes of my hair should just be in the edge of every single frame, just because he's following everyone around. But he's very much not a stalker in the show, which is something that I always try to bring up as much as possible.
I mean, that's the big thing. This is the book. This is not the book. This is the show, right? So it's like, yes, there's going to be things. Like, I feel like some people sometimes have a hard time with that a little bit, in my opinion.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think what was important to us was that we take the essence of not just what made the book successful, but also what allowed so many different people to connect with the characters, most specifically with Harriet, because it so teaches in their perspective. And I think that we've managed to translate while making it feel very kind of modern and like something that will appeal to everyone, as well as people who are fans of the books.
Yeah, absolutely. In a lot of ways, well, first off, there's so much that kind of happens before you go to camera on a project. You know what I mean? You're having meetings and discussions and you're preparing and you're getting your lines in order and everything. So it's like in a lot of ways from a storytelling acting perspective, it's almost like two journeys, right? Like before filming and after filming type thing. Or for you, does it feel like one big journey with multiple steps, or does it feel like two separate journeys?
For me, it felt like, to be fair, there was some time. But actually, there's one story. The first time I met all of the rest of the cast was at the read-through. That was the first time I met Liam, Emily, Manny. And there was a camera that was beaming our performances to LA and to Canada. And I was just sat there, and Daisy was sat to my right, who, if you've seen any of the show, know is phenomenal and looks so incredible and like such a pro when she's walking. And
I just spoke to her like 2 weeks ago for another project.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
But so Daisy's to my right, and then Rochelle, Liam, Emily, and Manny are to my left. And so I just kind of look down the table, and I just look, first of all, because of Daisy, I'm constantly kind of bearing in mind my hair's a lot bigger then. So if I lean too far forward to watch the other guy's performances, I'm just eclipsing her entirely. So I'm kind of slightly aware of that. But I also look up and down, and I just think, okay. So all of these people have been preparing for roles for which they've been cast to look like they could be like models and supermodels. And I have been cast because I look like I have, quote, the air of a meerkat. And touche, first of all. I can't fault the moment. But just realizing the fact that the point is that there was a pretty major, well, maybe not major, but there was a difference in how all of us ended up coming to it. They were learning how to walk and how to kind of exist in the model space. And I was just trying to find the essence of the journey that Toby goes on in himself as he goes.
Yeah.
And so, but it did all feel like one continuous process, at least for me, just because you're always finding it even after you've gotten onto camera. There isn't a moment where you feel like right before, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing. And that was part of the fun. We were kind of learning and figuring it out as we were going, all of us, and stuff was changing in the scripts, and we were kind of improvising around the material and finding the dynamics between to the characters.
Yeah.
One of the really great things about working on this.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because you look at a lot of, the content in the YA young adult space and everything. And I think the thing that really hits hard, obviously, is the coming of age and the self-reflection and everything. And I feel like that's always kind of like, you look at Geek Girl, you look at like other Netflix YA shows like Heartstopper and Young Royals. They have so much that kind of happens like drama and relationship wise, but the coming of age is always kind of sprinkled around, right? It's like dust that's always in the air. Does it feel like that when you're reading the scripts for Geek Girl as well? Where like, yeah, there's like certain episodes touch on certain things, focus on different characters, but that coming of age self-reflection is always around, because I feel like that's what we have of this show, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And that was to me what jumped out in the scripts more than anything else. And especially because of like Emily's great performance, that's what always feels like it's at the forefront of the show. It's rare that there's any moment that feels like it's doing anything other than propelling her character forward towards the questions that everybody ends up asking themselves when they're that age, especially when they're kind of a fish out of water in a new environment. And so that was definitely key in my reading of the shows, and I think in some ways key in my role as it related to Harriet's journey in the show as well.
It's interesting because playing characters that are lost, I feel like, is really interesting, because they don't, in a lot of ways, right? Like at that age, like you don't know that you're lost at sometimes, you know what I mean? Is that challenging from an acting perspective, in your opinion? Is it more fun? Like that's cool to think about, right? When you think of that slice of life coming of age aspect of it.
For sure. I think That's an interesting way to think about it. For me, I think I've been thinking a lot more about kind of feeling like I'm kind of floating above my character's intention of things, because it's always important that you have an intention behind things that you're doing, but being aware of how much your character is aware of the actions that they're taking and what's beneath them is something else entirely.
Yep.
And I think especially when you're a teenager, but I think at any point in your life, you can get a sense like you have no idea how much you don't know, both about yourself and about the world around you. And I feel like sometimes playing being lost is more about playing not realizing you don't understand the direction that you think you're going on fully, rather than, because, like, as you say, oftentimes we don't fully realize we're lost until one moment where it just kind of locks in.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, right, from a storytelling perspective, though, because it's like it's totally, that's what I get from all those shows. To be honest with you, I'm like, yeah, you know, there's some heartfelt moments, but like all these characters are lost, and then like it's like, how are they gonna find their way? And they do, and then sometimes you think they are gonna find their way, and then, you know, season finale of a season, in the last second they don't find their way, and then you're waiting the next season. Like, it's interesting to think about. You know what I mean? And last question before we wrap up, because it's exciting. May 30th, Geek Girl is going to be available on Netflix. That's so cool. I'm so happy for you and the cast.
Thank you.
I feel like you try not to do this, but I feel like it's hard sometimes. But I'm curious, based on how you were talking about your character and what you were thinking about, I'm really excited to hear your answer on this. When do you start being conscious of the audience member watching Geek Girl? Does that ever happen while you're making it? Or is that a real kind of rap thing where it's like, I am thinking about that afterwards? Because I feel like, you know, a show like this has so many heartfelt moments and so many things that happen that, like, maybe you are thinking about, like, what are people going to think about how these two characters interact at this seed? Like, I'm wondering if, like, you're ever conscious while you're making the show.
I think it's something that definitely comes up, at least to me. It's something that I try to avoid at all costs, just because, just thinking about that every now and again, like, because often, like, there are especially a couple of scenes in this show where it feels very, very kind of small and very intimate, where you feel like, okay, it's just the two of us, or just the few of us sharing this moment. And that's always really when you want to keep it, because that's where it ends up its most natural. Yeah. But then every now and again, maybe you're just waiting around, because that's so much of the job, is just kind of waiting for, you know, other people to do wonderful jobs at whatever they're doing. Is that, like, I'm just sitting there, I'm just thinking, so this feels very small, but those people are actually going to watch this. Like, and that's something that I kind of try to imagine every project that I do as if we're going to make it, and then nobody else is ever going to watch it, and then it kind of is done. And that's what
now the reality like allows me to be the most. The reality of it on May 30th is Netflix. Like, the complete opposite.
Oh no! People are gonna see it. No, God,
the reality of what it's so funny that, like, your mentality is like, what the reality of the situation is like what's gonna happen on the 30th.
Completely different.
Completely opposite.
I'm deluding myself into thinking, oh, okay, yeah, it's fine. It's not gonna be a big deal. But it's and then the 30th gonna come around.
It's the complete opposite in, like, the best way possible, if you think about it.
Yeah, for sure.
May 30th on Netflix. That's going to be Geek Girl. Zach, so great chatting with you. Thanks so much for your time, man.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This has been PopTurner. YouTube.com/PopTurner for previous episodes. Until next time, this is Zach and Petey Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to PopTurnative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of PopTurnative on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.